Witness called Mr. X and public order policing expert Gary White. Now, Mr. X was one of the striking miners at Marikana back in 2012, and he's under police witness protection. But for more on the story, let's cross now live to our reporter Nozintombi Miya, who is in Centurion as we speak. Nozintombi, a very good morning to you. Perhaps you can give us a bit of context. Mr. X has admitted to being involved in some of the murders, including that of a miner who was not on strike, as well as a security guard. But what was the reaction like of the widows who were at that inquiry?
Well, good morning, Ayanda. It's been quite explosive testimony from Mr. X from last week, Thursday, Friday, and the bulk of this week, Monday and Tuesday. He gave us some grisly details of how two lineman security guards were killed. One was killed and then burned alive in his car. And then the other was killed and then moved a bit away from the car. And then some of his body parts were cut off. The mouth, the tongue, the nose, and some of the ears were cut off for the striking miners, who refer to themselves as the makarapa, to then make muti out of that body parts. The muti was then taken to the inyanga, who was stationed at the kopi. And you'll remember their kopi was considered their headquarters or holy ground, as they, the makarapas themselves, refer to it. And once that happened, the sangomas then took the muti, burnt it and mixed it with the body parts and sprayed the group of makarapas to make them more invincible to police bullets and more stronger. It's been absolutely shocking, absolutely grisly. And once Mr. X started talking about that testimony, the gallery broke into gasps. Some of the widows started crying. You'll remember that one of the widows of the miners, Alicia Langa, she absolutely collapsed and she was in a shocking state. So it's been shocking statements from Mr. X.
What else did he say, Nozintombi, about the union rivalry between NUM and AMCU members? Did he say anything that was of substance with regards to that?
Yes, he did. What he said is that the day after they'd killed the two lineman security guards, early in the morning, they walked to the NUM offices chanting, "We will kill NUM, we will kill NUM." And luckily, they were intercepted by shot rubber bullets so that they could disperse. Otherwise, it would have been an absolutely even more explosive situation, because they were unrepentant. They wanted to kill the NUM that was in charge, because they believed that the NUM was not fighting for their rights, was not fighting for them to get the 12,500 that they were looking for. So they were looking to get the 12,500 no matter what it took. Anybody that was in their way was going to be killed, destroyed or beaten. They were not backing down.
Perhaps you can also tell us how much more testimony we can expect, or whether or not he's wrapped up. Give us that answer, and also please a brief summary of what policing expert Gary White had to say.
Well, we are expecting that Mr. X will continue on with his testimony as from Monday. The bulk of next week will be Mr. X's testimony, wrapping up the testimony. And then some of the police lawyers will get an opportunity to cross-examine Mr. X. And you remember that most of the lawyers that are here from the Human Rights Commission, some of the lawyers that are representing the widows, some that are representing the injured miners, are looking forward to cross-examining and tearing apart his testimony so they can get to the truth of whether or not Mr. X was telling the truth indeed. You'll remember that on Monday morning, Darlene Pofu, who is one of the advocates for the injured miners, made an application to get Mr. X declared mentally unfit as a witness. Unfortunately, that submission that he made was unsuccessful, and Judge Ian Farlam then said, no, Mr. X can continue with his testimony, because he's felt so far Mr. X's testimony has been clear and it's been easy for them to follow. So that was the biggest issue that had happened between Monday and Tuesday. But we are expecting that Mr. X will continue with his testimony as from Monday next week. To talk a little bit about Gary White, he's an international policing expert who's been brought in from Northern Ireland, and he's expected to talk about how the police failed to plan properly and they failed to implement the intelligence that they'd been given to be able to intercept the miners and to resort to a less lethal method of stopping them from either going back to the kopi or going into the surrounding shacks, whereby they would either try and kill maybe some of the miners who were not participating in the strike. And he's criticized police's handling of that entire situation, and he said that he felt that the police needed better planning, and that Northwest General Zukiswa Mbombo needed to take ultimate responsibility of the entire operation, because you will remember that most of the police officers who've testified have said that the police comms failed, they were unable to communicate with each other, and therefore they were unable to get a clear and overall view of how they were supposed to continue with the operation. They claimed that's why they acted in silo. But this is an argument that many at the Commission are not buying, and it's been reiterated by Gary White's testimony and his evidence to say that the police should have planned better, they should have had better communication, and overall Mrs. Mbombo should have taken responsibility and said, we failed as the police to handle the situation correctly, therefore I am going to take ownership and take the following steps to ensure that in future such a situation does not happen. In future we will not call in the tactical response team as the final line, because the tactical response team only responds with lethal R5 weapons, and that is absolutely shocking and should not happen.
My goodness,
so Gary White has given a very clear account, clear evidence of how the police should have conducted themselves, and they did not conduct themselves well. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Nozintombi, for that information. I know you'll continue to keep a close eye on what's happening there, and we'll continue to cross to you throughout the course of the day on DSTV channel 404, SABC News. And thank you so much again for your time. Nozintombi Miya is speaking to us about the testimonies of two of the witnesses that we've seen over the week.